All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. This will be our final panel for the session. What about 3.0? I'm Dennis Wallace, the managing partner of Mintel Scrignoli Wallace consulting firm, and I'll be your moderator for this panel. As you know, the development of the new ATSC 3.0 digital television standard is nearing its completion in the ATSC committee, in the standards work that's taking place there, and broadcasters and consumer electronic manufacturers are looking forward to the launch of ATSC 3 broadcast services as well as consumer products in the market. South Korea has already adopted ATSC 3 standard for deployment in South Korea prior to the 2018 Winter Olympics, so they're taking the lead, and products are going to be available for the Winter Olympics in South Korea within that time frame. U.S. broadcasters petitioned the FCC earlier this year to allow stations to voluntarily use ATSC 3 transmissions and to begin ATSC 3 operations here in the United States. So, will the stars align? Is there a role for ATSC 3.0 in the Repack? What's the opportunity for stations? How will this proposed voluntary transition work? And is the broadcast industry supply chain and vendor ecosystem ready for 3.0? To answer these important questions, we've assembled a very esteemed panel to talk to us today about that. Each one of them brings a different perspective, from business and standards work to legal, regulatory, and obviously technical and engineering. So let me introduce quickly the panel, and then I'll just start off with some rapid quick-fire questions for us. To my immediate right is Ann Shelley. Ann is the Managing Director of Pearl, a partnership of broadcast station group owners with cumulatively over 200 stations, and Pearl includes Cox Media Group, Graham Media Group, Scripps, Hearst Television, Meredith Local Media, Tegna, Raycom, as well as Media General. Pearl has taken a leadership role in the planning and development and implementation of ATSC 3, and also serves on the Advanced Television Systems Committee Board of Directors. To Ann's right is Dave Siegler. Dave is the Vice President of Technical Operations for Cox Media Group and leads the engineering and technology teams at Cox Media Group's 15 television stations and 86 radio stations. Dave also serves on the Advanced Television Systems Board of Directors and is chairman of the National Association of Broadcasters TV Technical Committee. Before joining Cox, Dave was at Turner Broadcasting and also at Post Newsweek stations. And then to Dave's right is Rebecca Hansen. Rebecca is the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Policy for Sinclair Broadcast Group. She joined Sinclair in January 2014 when she opened Sinclair's first Washington, D.C. office to represent Sinclair before the FCC and also on Capitol Hill. Prior to joining Sinclair, Rebecca spent 4 years at the FCC as a senior advisor for Spectrum in the Media Bureau, and also served on the Incentive Auction Task Force while at the FCC. Prior to the FCC, Rebecca was Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Sprint. So we have a well-qualified panel to discuss our topic today, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to sort of jump into some rapid-fire questions here and then hopefully leave some time at the end for questions from the audience. So let me start off with Ann. Ann, what's the opportunity for broadcasters that ATSC 3.0 represents? What's the incentive for a station to make the move to 3.0?
Let me first start with what are the capabilities of this new, this next generation TV standard, and why are we looking at enhancing our current platform that we have today? So before, I'd like to quickly ask, how many in the room actually understand or know what the 3.0 standard can enable broadcasters to do in the marketplace? Oh, wow, we've got an educated crowd. Okay. That makes it really easy. Well, I'm going to go through it anyway because because I think you might know, but I think there's some things I'm going to say that you might not have really thought of before. And you know, if you think about when the digital television standard was developed, that was back when we didn't have HTML. We still had analog cell phones. We certainly didn't have what we have today in terms of the internet. We didn't have what we have today in terms of the iPhone. we didn't have this robust content marketplace that exists today. So how consumers are consuming content is something that I would bet you not anybody in this room would have predicted. Maybe a few futurists, but I would bet you nobody in this room. So the old standard is old, and it's static. It was not something that could necessarily be evolved because we didn't perceive what we have today in terms of current technological advancements that have happened over the last 25 years. So to address this issue, the ATSC over 6 years ago, and I think that's important to note, over 6 years ago, started working on a next generation television platform. ATSC is a group of over 125 companies. These are well-known companies from OEMs and manufacturers like Samsung, to chip manufacturers like Qualcomm. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but it's a very robust group of companies as well as a very global group of companies coming from places like China and Korea, et cetera. When we approached this new standard, we were thinking outside the box. What did we need to change? We didn't adopt a standard that exists today. You had DVB-T2 that was out there. We rejected that and looked for something that made sense in terms of where consumers are going. So really putting consumers first. Today you have a pretty robust over-the-air market. The numbers are going up. Latest estimates around anywhere from 14 to 17%. So consumers are finding OTA. Why? Because it's free and it's quality content. But again, we need to keep pace with what's happening out there in the marketplace. So let me run through what I see as some of the benefits of this new standards. For starters, it's an all IP-based broadcast protocol. It's the world's first, and it was invented here in the United States. I think that's pretty remarkable, and it allows us to do some really, really unique things. It creates a hybrid environment for the consumer. We can enable personalized content to the consumer. On the video side, it brings the best in quality, 4K high dynamic range, which is better blacks and better whites, wide color gambit, which is more color. It's a state-of-the-art video compression. We can do more with our spectrum, but also offer more channels. This is more diversity in channels for consumers that are with the free over-the-air service. It has immersive audio, theater-like audio. Personalization and dynamic interactive capabilities. We use the best of the web technologies. So we followed the WC3. I can go on and use a bunch of acronyms, but what this means is that we bring broadcasts to be on peer with broadband, which is significant again with that hybrid consumer experience. Advanced emergency alerting. You probably heard a lot about this. This is what AWARN has been promoting. This is the ability to give first responders more than just simply text at the bottom of a screen. These are videos, these are maps, these are much needed things in the times of emergency. Key accessibility features, features that do exist today, but they're much better. It's extensible. It will be the last transition we have to do. This technology can evolve. Maybe we're copying a little bit of where the cellular industry is with LTE, but this is a standard that can evolve. It's flexible, and lastly, it's robust. It doesn't matter what screen you receive it on. It can be a small mobile screen. It can be a large screen, and that's an important point as well. So with that, I'll stop my educational speech.
No, that's excellent. So, I was always taught engineering school, always invert, right? Always invert. So let me ask the question the opposite way, which is if broadcasters don't make the transition to ATSC 3, what's the risk to a broadcaster? What's the risk to the industry? What are the potential negatives for not making a transition to 3.0 for broadcasters?
We would have an inverted future.
We would have an inverted future, yeah.
So Pearl's done a lot of work on looking at that. We have a very robust business today. Again, I mentioned that OTA figure, the over-the-air consumer consumption of our content. At the same time, we want to evolve our platform. So these new capabilities will enable us to continue to offer our business, but also new business capabilities that maybe not exist today. I mean, we can't predict the future. But it certainly takes broadcasting into the future. and I think that's important.
Well, it certainly provides a flexible platform as the business changes for broadcasters to adopt to future things.
I was at a conference in Canada yesterday, and somebody said, and which I thought was a good way to look at this, it's a platform that enables us to be flexible to meet whatever the future business need is in terms of video consumption.
Excellent. Rebecca, let me ask you a question. How does ATSC 3.0 benefit consumers and viewers? I mean, we have sort of this three-legged stool I always kind of view of in the television business. We have broadcasters, we have the consumer electronics manufacturers, but also the viewers and the audience. What's in it for them?
Well, Anne touched on a lot of the specific new services that are enabled by 3.0, but one reason, a main reason why Sinclair has been driving 3.0 development for many years as well is because there are three things that Sinclair Broadcast Group is very passionate about, and that's over-the-air broadcasting, technical innovation, and competition. And all those three things come together in ATSC 3.0. I think everyone in this room agrees that over-the-air broadcast is a core piece of our communications infrastructure, and in fact, this repacking effort is dedicated to ensuring a robust future for over-the-air broadcasting. We think it's a very important choice for viewers in the mix of video options that are available. This doesn't mean that we don't value our cable and our satellite distribution platforms. We very much do. But as long as OTA is in the mix, we want over-the-air broadcasting to be the best that it can be, and we think that 3.0 brings it there. With respect to technical innovation, as you've already heard, it's essential for our future for broadcast technology to advance, which is why by the end of this year, my company will have invested around $30 million in the development of the ATSC 3.0 standard, related technology, and transition planning, because we think it's essential for us to evolve. And then finally, with respect to competition, we firmly believe that Next Gen will result in a lot of new viewer options in the marketplace. These services might compete with current services out there. These services might complement current services out there. We might build these new services ourselves or in collaboration with other broadcasters. There could be partnerships between us and wireless companies and cable providers as well. But in any case, we believe the market is going to drive the introduction of these new services. And in any case, however those are enabled, we believe that viewers will have new choices. And that's the key driver behind our passion for ATSC 3.0.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. So Dave, you know, you come from a technical and engineering background, and you also serve on the ATSC board. Can you give us a little bit of a background on where we're at ATSC with the standards process, where things stand, where we're headed, and sort of what that looks like?
Sure, if I can stand. So I can see my own slides. ATSC 3.0 standards work progress report. Here's where the development is for 3.0. Just to clarify that ATSC 3.0 is a suite of standards. It's not just one standard. There are one or more standards per layer, and each one moves through the process at a different pace. So rather than doing it linearly, and this standard is taking 10 years, we do it in parallel, and it's taking us about 6, but it's getting it done faster. Final approval of each of the sections of the document is expected by first or second quarter of next year, and I've got a breakdown of those in just a minute. The SEC is considering changing rules to authorize the use of ATSC 3.0. This is what we call the physical layer. This is the emissions part of ATSC 3.0, and that has been done, and that's been completed, and we do appreciate the consideration you guys here with the SEC are making on that. ATSC 3.0, as Dennis had mentioned, has been selected by the Koreans, and they're looking to launch that for the 2018 Winter Olympics in Korea with 4K, notably. So the candidate standard, and I just want to explain just a minute of what the candidate standard is. That's a part of the process that once the proposed standard is defined, the theory, the math, the science, things go to a candidate standard phase for proofing it out to make sure that the math and the science really works in the real world. That's a key period to know that this is really going to work, and that's the last phase of all of these parts of the process. This is the phase at which the specialist group is responsible for formally acquiring that experience. So get your hands dirty with it, just again, to make sure that this is going to work in the real world. And finally, this is the standard development timeline. So as Ann has mentioned, ATSC 3.0 standard has been in the works for a number of years, starting back in 2012 as being conceptual. The top swim lane there is noting the events of ATSC 3 through the system requirements, defining all the requirements, the functionality, the technical standards, and it brings us to here where the star is at 2016 as we're ending the year to bring this into candidate standard. And about 3/4 of it is finished in candidate standard. There are some other phases to go. Wrapping up with the first quarter of the year having all of the standards defined, and then that candidate standard phase is going to get compressed to be completed by about the middle part of the year. So we're saying about mid-year next year it will be done, a full fleshed out candidate, full fleshed out standard. Now the industry, we need industry involvement as well, and the industry has been very, very engaged in this process. As Anna had mentioned, hundreds of companies, thousands of engineers, many thousands of man hours have gone into developing this standard. So we've got, it looks good on paper, we've got to get it to lab, we've got to prototype, proof it out, and make sure everything works, and tweak and adjust anything that needs to be adjusted to make it work. And then there's product, in the green arrow here is product design. The industry is now looking at receivers, developing receivers, and then ultimately the receivers will be built into the new set as we roll out into the marketplace with a commercial launch in a couple of years. The swim lane on the bottom, SEC, the broadcast incentive auction, certainly we know what's happening there, and this red piece here didn't come out very well. But it's really, I'm trying to depict here that there can be the possibility of overlapping a 3.0 change with the repack. And that it's coincidental, but it's good, because we think that with minimal disruption to the consumer, there's a lot of value in that. So it's an opportunity, not just a challenge, but it's an opportunity to bring these together at one time. Okay.
Thanks, Dave. All right, so that gives us a sense of the time frame. When the broadcasters filed their petition for rulemaking earlier this year, they proposed a voluntary move. Stations have the option to transmit ATSC 3, but no requirement to do so. Rebecca, can you tell us, how does this market-based approach work to an ATSC 3 transition? How do services get launched? How do products get on the shelves? How do consumers purchase products? How does all this work under a voluntary regime?
Well, first I'd like to go into why we thought it should be voluntary. I think that's important to remember the context for that. Other communications industries are free to evolve their technology on their own time frame, and for historical reasons, the technology in our industry has to be approved by the FCC, and we understand that, we understand the history, but since we have this opportunity before us, we didn't want to rely on the entire industry being ready, because there's a wide variety of capabilities within broadcasting. There are small broadcasters and large broadcasters. So we wanted the transition to the 3.0 standard to be voluntary so that those that are ready and eager to transition to 3.0 and really lead the pathway and set an example for stragglers, we wanted to be able to do that. Because there are some broadcasters still that might not be prepared to explore the opportunities of 3.0, but we didn't feel it was appropriate for the innovators to be held back by a minority of folks that are more risk averse or don't have the capability to transition. So that's, if you understand that, then you can appreciate why we went to a lot of effort to come up with a transition plan that is voluntary and that allows some broadcasters to dive into 3.0, but it also allows broadcasters who want to stay on the old technology to do so, really, for the foreseeable future.
And I know Pearl has spent a lot of time deep diving the transition. Maybe you could give us your perspective on how a voluntary transition would work.
Sure, I agree with everything Rebecca said. I think it's important to note, though, that our current business is a healthy business, and so we're looking at enhancing our current platform with 3.0, And there's a way to do that through broadcast collaboration and sharing of host sticks for 3.0 while you're transitioning over a period of time. So even in Rebecca's comment, just to be clear, our 1.0 service is going to remain up and running, for the foreseeable future. But at the same time, the spectral efficiencies with the compression technology allows us to be able to find host sticks in the market that we can enable for 3.0 and to start the process going as less forward-leaning, as Rebecca mentioned. There might be some broadcasters that are not as forward-leaning as, say, Sinclair or the Pearl companies, might decide to come in later. But you will see a baseline of services coming out in the marketplace that provide for a meaningful market launch. Both Sinclair and Pearl have been, this might be a question you have later, so I'm sorry to steal the thunder.
All right.
But what's also important to note, it's just not about the transmission, and you have to also get the content, but you also need the OEMs, so you need product on the shelves. So a traditional uptake of products in the marketplace, 7 to 10 years. So, the faster we get the services up and running, but we also have to have the OEMs, the sets, the tablets, whatever is going to be enabled with that tuner chip starting to be produced and distributed on shelves. I can say that the OEMs have committed to producing television sets with 1.0 and 3.0 in the set. And Korea actually is the perfect proving ground for that, because that is a marketplace where they'll already be doing this. And when manufacturers produce chipsets these days, they don't just do it for one. It's usually a module that includes multiple chipsets. So, it's great that Korea is moving forward. We've got 2 big partners there, LG and Samsung. You're going to see product, February coming out that's actually similar to what the product would be here in the United States, but more importantly, that chipset that needs to be in the TV set will be there.
And I can give an example of how, to answer your question about how specifically would that transition happen on a voluntary basis. I mean, one of the benefits of 3.0 is its increased capacity, and that actually will help with the transition to 3.0 itself. We envision, and this is in the petition, we envision that in a marketplace, like-minded broadcasters would be able to simulcast their 1.0 content on one tower, and then the other tower would be a 3.0 tower. And that 3.0 tower, with its increased capacity, could air the same content, duplicative content of 1.0 in 3.0, so that viewers in the marketplace can experience the benefit of 3.0, while at the same time viewers who are still dependent on 1.0, either because they haven't upgraded their television or what have you, they will still have those services. That's just one small example, a rudimentary example of how we're making this transition without additional spectrum, I might add.
Excellent. Yeah, so so let's talk about that for just a second. The concept I think that folks are familiar with is that this would be on a market-by-market basis, and that broadcasters, as you mentioned, that are like-minded would get together. What are some of the mechanics of that from a technical perspective? What are the things that stations have to consider when they're working out the transition plan in a market? How do you choose which station is the 3.0, the 1.0 station? Anybody that wants to jump in on that one, I'd be happy to.
Since we used you to help us figure that out. So we've done, like Sinclair, we've done a lot of modeling. We actually originally did a cost study to analyze the cost of moving to 3.0 to understand that. This was over 2 years ago. Then we started looking at sort of how would we implement a transition in the market, and how would you sort of determine what a host stick was. It's going to be different market to market. You're going to look for, the best service that you can to come off that host stick. It could be one of the Pearl member stick. It could be a Sinclair stick. It could be another participant in the marketplace. A non-commercial stick but it's hard for us to actually say exactly what it is until the auction is over. But we have done some mock negotiations amongst our companies just to see if it's possible, and we do have a framework for moving forward and a methodology for doing it.
Excellent. Okay. So
I would add to that too that it's a little bit like Groundhog Day. It's like going back to the early days of HD, where when we first did our rollout, we all get digital, And then typically starting at the larger markets, down through the mid-markets, down through the little markets, eventually everybody's HD. Everybody's HD through the studio. But it starts with the pass-through from the network, okay? And then you start building out your studio, you add that capability in your studio, then you're doing live in the field in HD, and it just works its way through the ecosystem. And we talk about things functionally like 4K, HDR, audio, and some of these new services. I see that rollout similar to where certainly 4K or HDR is going to originate back up at the network. It's going to pass through the station. Again, through that evolvement, we'll get there.
Start with network and then eventually local production, just like we have in every transition
I believe so.
we've made, right? Okay, good, excellent. So Dave showed a slide about sort of the time frame for the ATSC standard, and I mentioned the petition for rulemaking that had been filed with the commission earlier this year. Rebecca, can you kind of give us your view of where the petition stands and what's the timeline at the FCC? I know you were talking to the folks there about how do we get 3.0 and get that out as quick as we can.
Yeah, well, a petition was filed in the spring, and the FCC very quickly put it out for comment. We were very appreciative of that, and comments rolled in over the course of the summer. But now it's really, it's with the FCC, and we're waiting for them to issue an NPRM, which would really just be a collection of questions on how the industry and stakeholders should be thinking about this and informing a rulemaking. We very much wanted the FCC to issue the NPRM by October 1st, and that didn't happen. But I have reason to believe that pen is being put to paper now, and that hopefully by the end of the year, maybe they will be able to issue something. At least that's what we understand through the NAB.
Excellent. Okay, good. So, obviously this is a long process. We start with standards, we go through the regulatory issues, and then, as Dave's slide mentioned, consumer products rollout and so forth. Dave, I'm curious, is the alignment, the time alignment for the Repack and ATSC 3, is this going to work out? What does this really look like for broadcasters in terms of the rollout and the Repack, the rollout of ATSC 3 and the Repack of the spectrum? Can these really work in the same time frame?
Well, like with so many variables with the Repack, there are many variables with 3.0 as well, but it looks promising. I would say not a slam dunk, but it looks promising that those two events could coincide, or at least partially. And I think that the real benefit to that is to minimize the disruption to the consumer. One change instead of two changes. One rescan, like what were mentioned earlier in the Repack, 1 or 2 per market. If we could get those new services activated at the same time, there's a lot of benefit to the broadcaster, to the consumer, and to the FCC.
Excellent. All right, good. Obviously the rollout of ATSC 3 requires support from our industry supply chain and vendors, broadcast equipment manufacturers. What's kind of your perspective or interaction that you've had with vendors and industry supply chain folks? Are they developing products for 3.0? Are we ready for 3.0, Ann or Dave?
Yeah, so I'd say on the transmission side, definitely. If you were at NAB last year, you certainly saw implementations from Gates Air, other transmission manufacturers. Again, Korea being a lead here. So manufacturers like Samsung and LG, as well as Sony, showing implementations of 3.0 at NAB and CES last year. Look for more next year. I thought the NAB did a great job demonstrating live transmissions. You also have test markets. And I won't speak for Sinclair, but great stuff they're doing here in Washington with single frequency networks, which is a comment I left off. That's the ability to add repeaters because the platform enables OFDMA. So that's important in terms of really being able to offer a robust signal in the marketplace. But they're leading on the SFN build. They have a test market here. WRAL did a test market. They transmitted the Olympics in 3.0 this summer. So a lot going on. I mean, this is just around the corner. And, again, it's a digital to digital change. So for the OEMs, a lot of their equipment the stuff inside, and I'm not an engineer, but stuff inside the TV set or whatever, a lot of it's the same. It's just it's sort of changing. They're taking some of their architecture and just changing it slightly for 3.0.
Right. Good. So last question for Dave, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I know we're running out of time here. Dave, when you're looking at your group and Cox Media Group and potential repack situations for stations that might be moving RF channels, are you looking at 3.0 upgradable or 3.0 ready transmission equipment? What's kind of your view of the world from that perspective?
We definitely are, and we drank the Kool-Aid on 3.0 a long time ago, and we're all in, and we're excited about it. We're going to invest in it. We're just waiting for some of these other clicks to fall into place, and we're ready to go with it. So we've got funding behind it. We've got funding laid into the next 3 to 5 capital out years, and we're ready to go.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm standing between you and happy hour, but I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions if we have some audience folks that have some questions. Go ahead.
Come on here. This industry, television industry, has essentially been a very uncoalesced group over the past number of decades. But this rollout of the 3.0 is going to require cooperation amongst networks that have in the past been competing with each other. How do you see that working into? Are you seeing world peace kind of situation with broadcasters these days that hasn't existed in the past?
I think Pearl is an example of that. We're a coalition of, and we're actually a business organization. We're not an association, so we're investing together. So we're 9 companies. I also think that you've had a massive consolidation in the industry over the last 5 years, which is helpful. I also think that broadcasters are realizing that our competition is not ourselves, and that we all have we have a vision, and it's very similar. So the cooperation, Sinclair and Pearl signed an MOU with Samsung 2 years ago on 3.0. So you're just going to see more collaboration than ever. I'm confident that the broadcasters can move out with 3.0. I think you'll have leaders, and it will certainly be a platform that's open to all broadcasters.
So I'll add to that, Kevin, too, that I see that, yes, there's a healthy competition there. There's a healthy tension between the networks there, but I see that as opportunity. I mean, you're going to get some couple of 3-letter networks that are going to say, we want to be first, we want the best quality, we want to be out there first. I think that's opportunity.
So a follow-up question for Ann, the question that I asked Dave a minute ago, actually, about whether the vendor and supply chain folks are ready, and how does this line up with the transition? Do we buy upgradable equipment? I know Pearl's done some work with this and kind of leading some thinking about how that works, and I forgot to ask you that question.
Yeah, so you probably saw a document that was on your chair. This is a white paper that was developed not just by Pearl, it was actually Pearl and Sinclair, and I have to do a shout out to Gates Air and American Tower. It was an idea that came about this past spring when we were starting to talk about everything that was being said earlier is, how do we move forward? How do we get this done in terms of a 3.0 transition, but at the same time being respectful to a repack? And that is what this document's all about. It's a guide for broadcasters. I think back in the day with the HD transition, there was a Bible, if you will, that was developed over a period of time. This is our first shot at it. We're going to learn from things that are happening here. It'll be constantly updated. It's available on the Gates Air website. Please download it. We provided just a link. But again, it was a collaboration of over 12, 13 companies, all looking forward-thinking in terms of how do we ensure that 3.0 gets properly built at the time of the repack so that broadcasters and consumers benefit.
So I know several folks in the room contributed to that effort, and it's a very good read for those of you that haven't downloaded that document. Definitely encourage you to do that. So one last question, and then we'll end it for happy hour.
Hi, I have a question about the cost differential between 3.0 ready equipment and 1.0 equipment, and how that relates back to the reimbursement funds.
So I could probably answer that question, but I don't know if Dave wants to tackle that or not. So I think what you'll find across the transmission equipment industry is that everybody's moving to software-defined radio platforms. An exciter that is going to be utilized in the Repack for a 1.0 transmitter is exactly the same exciter that we would use for a 3.0 transmitter, with just the difference of a software key, essentially. The main transmission components, channel filters, antennas, all of that stuff is going to essentially be the same for 3.0 as it is for 1.0. Stations may make some choices about elliptical polarization or C-pole or some things about the antenna configuration that might be slightly different in terms of anticipating 3.0, but it's going to be perfectly usable for 1.0, it's going to be usable for 3.0. The only thing the stations really need to do are upgrades in terms of exciters, or if they have not purchased a new exciter as part of the Repack, they're going to have to buy a new exciter as part of that. All right, well, thank you very much. Let's give our panel a hand, and thank you very much.